For 50 years, if you crossed an ocean, you almost certainly did it inside one of these giants. Today, they are sitting in desert boneyards, waiting to be scrapped. What killed the biggest passenger planes ever built is a story about oil, politics, engineering disasters, and one regulatory change that nobody saw coming. The problem that created the jumbo. Go back to the 1960s and look at what was happening at major airports. Los Angeles, London, Tokyo, completely overwhelmed. Air travel was growing at 10 to 20% annually, and the planes that existed could carry 150 people at most. Narrow body, single aisle, limited capacity. Cities faced an impossible choice: build more runways through neighborhoods that did not want to be demolished, or build bigger planes that could move more people per flight. The math was simple. To move 1,000 passengers with existing aircraft, you needed 10 flights. If you could build something large enough, you could do it with 2. The question was whether physics would cooperate. Nobody knew if something that size could actually get off the ground. The engines required did not yet exist. The manufacturing facility required to build it did not exist either. And yet, in 1966, Pan Am's CEO walked into Boeing's headquarters and asked for a plane twice the size of anything flying. 400 people in a single aircraft. Boeing bet the entire company on building it. The gamble that changed aviation. $2 billion in 1966 money, $18 billion in today's terms, went into the 747 program. Boeing built the largest building in the world just to assemble it. Engineers had no computers, no three-dimensional design tools. Everything was drawn by hand and modeled in wood. A full-scale wooden mock-up of the passenger cabin was constructed inside the factory because there was no other way to comprehend what 400 people in a single aircraft actually looked like physically. If the 747 failed, Boeing would go bankrupt. The company would cease to exist. Thousands of jobs would disappear. The pressure on the engineers working that program was unlike anything in commercial aviation history before or since. February 9, 1969, the moment of truth. The 747 rolled to the runway and lifted off. It worked, and that single flight changed everything. 400 people in one plane. The same number of passengers with 1/4 of the flights. Airport congestion solved without building a single new runway. And because you could pack more passengers per departure, ticket prices dropped 40% over the following decade. Flying stopped being something only wealthy people did. Middle-class families started booking international trips for the first time. The world opened up in a way it never had before. 50 years of dominance. What followed was one of the longest runs of commercial dominance in aviation history. The 747 took every form imaginable. A freighter version where the entire nose swings open so cars can be driven directly into the cargo bay. A short version designed for ultra-long routes, New York to Tokyo nonstop. A stretched version carrying 600 people. Air Force One in duplicate for the US president. A carrier for the space shuttle. For 3 decades, if you crossed an ocean, you almost certainly did it in a 747. Because the aircraft did not just serve a function, it became the symbol of the jet age itself. Boeing delivered 92 of them in 1970 alone. These were not rare aircraft, they were everywhere. And by the 1990s, the economics looked unbeatable. Airlines were printing money with jumbos. Airbus, watching from Europe, decided they needed an answer. Europe's bet, the A380. Airbus was founded in Toulouse in 1970, a startup from 4 European countries that nobody in the industry took seriously. Boeing had 90% of the global market. Airbus had 10. Over 30 years, under aggressive sales leadership that drove the company from 18% to 50% market share, Airbus transformed into a genuine rival. But they needed their own jumbo, not just to match the 747, but to beat it. In 2000, Airbus announced the A380. 2 full passenger decks from nose to tail. 853 people in all-economy configuration. A flying hotel, showers, bars, full beds in first class, a cabin that felt closer to a living room than a transport vehicle. The 747 had a hump and an upper deck. The A380 had 2 complete floors. It was genuinely and substantially bigger than anything that had ever flown passengers. The strategy behind it was the hub model. Giant airports in Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong would concentrate passengers from everywhere and redistribute them to final destinations. The A380 was perfectly engineered for that world. Maximum capacity between mega hubs. Maximum efficiency at scale. Emirates ordered over 100 of them and built their entire operation around it. Dubai became one of the most connected aviation hubs in human history on the back of the A380's capacity. The disaster nobody saw coming. Before a single A380 entered service, the program nearly collapsed from the inside. The aircraft was being built across 4 countries: France, Germany, Britain, Spain, each with its own engineering teams, its own software systems, its own manufacturing culture, and its own national pride, making it reluctant to admit problem. When the fuselage sections from different countries arrived in Toulouse for final assembly, engineers discovered something catastrophic. 20 centimeters of wiring harness were missing between the German and French sections. Not because of measurement errors, but because one team was working in 3-dimensional design software and the other was working in 2-dimensional. Hundreds of kilometers of cable had to be entirely relayed. 2 years of production delays. Billions in additional cost. Airbus had invested 30 billion euros in a program that eventually sold 230 aircraft, a number that could mathematically never return the investment. The wiring disaster was survivable. What came next was not. The 2 forces that killed the giants. In 2008, oil hit $140 per barrel. For airlines, whose biggest operating cost is fuel, that number changed every calculation on every route worldwide. A 747 burns 12 liters of fuel per passenger per 100 kilometers. A modern twin-engine 787 burns 8 liters for the same distance, 30% less fuel. Over 20 years of operation, that difference accumulates to $50 million per aircraft. Multiply across a fleet of 50 jumbos, and you are looking at billions of dollars disappearing into the atmosphere that did not have to. But the fuel numbers alone did not kill the jumbos. A regulatory change did. In the 1980s, twin-engine aircraft were prohibited from crossing oceans. If one engine fails, you need a backup. The rule required 3 or 4 engines for overwater safety. Twins had to hug coastlines and stay within 60 minutes of an airport at all times. This made 4-engine jumbos essential for intercontinental routes. But in 1985, ETOPS changed everything. ETOPS, Extended Range Twin-Engine Operational Performance Standards, allowed twin-engine aircraft to cross oceans if their engines met reliability thresholds. The 777 proved it could be done with 99.97% reliability. Regulators accepted the data. Overnight, the regulatory requirement that made jumbos essential for long-haul routes simply ceased to exist. Twin engines could now do everything 4 engines could do at 30% less fuel cost, with half the maintenance expense, and with dramatically lower acquisition costs. Airlines did not need the hub model anymore either. Instead of packing 400 people onto one London flight per day, airlines could fly 250 people to London, Manchester, and Edinburgh with 3 flights each. Passengers loved it. No connections. No long layovers in transit hubs, direct routes to where they actually wanted to go. The twin-engine 787 accumulated over 1,400 orders. Jumbo orders collapsed simultaneously. The Boneyard's A&D What Remains. December 2021. The last A380 rolled out of the Hamburg factory. Factory workers stood around it for a farewell that felt more like a funeral than a celebration, particularly because the global situation made a proper ceremony impossible, and perhaps because the mood did not call for one. 14 years of production, 230 aircraft sold, 30 billion euros invested. A program that by any financial measure was a catastrophic failure, even if the aircraft itself was genuinely loved by everyone who flew on it. January 31st, 2023. The last 747 ever built rolled out of the Everett factory after 54 years of production. Workers who had built their entire careers around that aircraft stood watching it leave. Boeing had launched a final version in 2011 with new engines and modern avionics. Airlines bought 47 passenger versions in total, compared to the thousands of 787s on order simultaneously. The numbers said everything. Now they sit in the desert. Victorville, Mojave, Teruel in Spain, where it almost never rains and dry air preserves airframes indefinitely. Some will fly again for cargo. Emirates is dismantling its early A380s for spare parts to keep the rest of the fleet flying longer. Lufthansa returned 6 of its 14 A380s to Airbus after barely 5 years of service. Airbus is using the original A380 prototype to test hydrogen aviation fuel, a second life for an aircraft that never achieved the commercial success it was designed for. A Pan Am CEO who wanted the impossible. Boeing betting its entire existence on physics nobody had tested. Airbus spending 30 billion euros on a bet the hub model would last. A 20-centimeter gap in a wiring harness that cost 2 years. An oil price spike that rewrote airline economics overnight. And a single regulatory change in 1985 that made 4 engines unnecessary and condemned the giants before any of them were built. The era of the jumbo jet lasted exactly as long as the conditions that created it. Drop a comment telling us whether you ever flew on a 747 or an A380 and what it was like. Check the end screen for more aviation history waiting for you right now.